Boyce Hendricks. Boyce was a former house manager and co-founder of the original Soteria house from the 1970s and co-author of the book Soteria Through Madness to Deliverance. And I also wanted to mention that if you want to me, it was just an amazing book, and it really gives you the feel of what it was like to be at Soteria House. So one of the things, Boyce, I'd like to ask you, I mean, because not everybody's going to read the book, can you tell us what it was like, day to day in the original Soteria House? And did you have problems remaining faithful to the program's design? Since it was a study, it was a program design, but, in other words, the philosophy and principles.
This is important here because the question seems simple, but it's extremely complicated. The design, when you say design, Lauren actually, in order to get to the grant, he designed a program which essentially stated he would have an elderly couple living in this house, living there, and during the day you would have staff come in and work with the resident, what we call later residents. That was the design. And that was the only design, which tells you nothing. And so essentially, we got hired, and we're sitting in the first day in the room, looking at each other. What are we going to do? We had no idea what we got. There was no models. There was the Kingsley Hall in London, which was sort of a model out there, but we had no real idea what we would actually do with the question you say day to day. That didn't exist. We had 3 weeks to train ourselves. And what that 3 weeks involved, we had people like the head of the Jungian Society of the United States came in one day, they do to train us about Jungian ideas. We spent a weekend at Esalen Institute, which they have all these powerful therapists there. And sort of, I'm not even sure what happened there. These people talked to us, but it had no really relevance to what we were going to actually do. And then the other thing that's probably the most helpful, and were the concept of visual, that you hear about Soteria a lot, the concept of visual, being with, and where that term being with comes from, is there was a study going on at Agnew State Hospital. It's the California State Hospital. It was probably the most progressive hospital in the state at the time. We spent probably up to 6 hours to the staff, me and, for instance, me and another female staff would find a patient in that study at the state hospital, and we would take him to a room, and we would spend 6-7 hours with him, just being with, no expectations. And there's something, I mean, even though by then I've had 10 years of working with people with a diagnosis of schizophrenia, but there's something different when you're set with someone with no expectations, and you just have to be with the person, the whole person. And you have to start figuring out what you're going to talk about. And then within 6 hours, you find that you have a whole lot in common, all three of you. It becomes you get connected in a way. And that, for some reason, had a very powerful impact on the first resident to be admitted to Soteria. We had like 6 or 7 staff, 4 of them were living in the house, and she comes in the house, and she's using the terminology of the time. She was delusional, hearing voices, word salad, all that kind of language. If you look at a chart, that's what you saw. And to communicate with her, it was just, that you didn't make sense, but she was so much fun to be with. And the house, I didn't live there, but I actually, within that first 4 days, spent at least 16 hours a day there at the house, and everybody else did. We just sort of bombed her with it. And it's amazing how just being with someone allows them to sort of interact back and forth. But the point is, we didn't have a model, we didn't have anything to model after. And what happened to Soteria is this process of being with, you learn how to just be with people. And if regardless, whatever they're going through, it becomes normal eventually. And they start interaction. The key thing that we noticed at Soteria is that sleep itself. A person can be, I don't know how many times I've seen this, person could be up 2 days and completely, and go to sleep for 8 hours and wake up and they'll be totally rational for about a half hour. And then this goes back. And that process over time, that thing just gradually changes, it becomes normal. And that thing we call delusion stuff just tends to go away and has nothing to do with medication. It just goes away. And the study showed it goes away about the same rate as they did the people at the hospital who were medicated. Symptoms track almost exactly the same. Being on medications, not medication, the hospital, the control group, 100% of those folks were on medication. So we're talking about two different populations in terms of the way people going through the process itself.